I have already compared the immigration opportunities in Serbia and Montenegro, but today I want to talk about something else, not about that. Today, let's compare the economic development of both countries and also talk about life in these countries in general. Both countries have their supporters and detractors, who passionately argue that life is best in their country and much worse in the other. Of course, all of this is complete nonsense. Both countries are very similar, and to claim that one of them is significantly better than the other is like arguing about whether blondes or brunettes are more attractive. By the way, the place where we're filming today is Porto Novi, which is a suburb of Herceg Novi. As I mentioned earlier, both countries are very similar, but Montenegro is a bit more developed, and it's clear that it will continue to outpace Serbia in its development. If anyone doubts this, comparing the development of each country is actually very simple. Just look at the minimum wage, the wage for labor. In Montenegro, the minimum wage since January 1, 2022 is 450 euros. There are currently discussions about raising it to 700 euros. In Serbia, only this year was the minimum wage set at 330 euros, and people dream of someday making it equal to what has long been established in Montenegro, that is 450 euros. What allows Montenegro to get ahead of Serbia? It's a matter of discounting. I think it's because Montenegro has created not exactly an offshore zone, but something close, some of the lowest taxes in Europe. Only 3 countries in Europe can compete in terms of tax rates, and the minimal government regulation, along with a high level of private property protection, attracts investment to the country. Investments are simply pouring in. Unfortunately, in Serbia, similar conditions have not been created, so investing in Serbia is less profitable. Although, to be fair, the Serbs are trying to catch up to Montenegro's indicators. Recently, they have significantly reduced taxes there, and although they are still higher than in Montenegro, the difference is no longer as big as it used to be. I think this measure will seriously help accelerate the development of the Serbian economy. As for the ways to legalize your stay in both countries, they are basically absolutely identical. Mostly, Russians and Ukrainians emigrate by opening a company or buying real estate, and less often through studying, working, or on a digital nomad visa. Among the significant differences, the following can be highlighted. In Serbia, a business cannot just sit idle. Therefore, immigration through opening a company is only suitable for real entrepreneurs. Whereas in Montenegro, you can obtain a residence permit by opening a shell company. In Serbia, it is very expensive to maintain a residence permit through a company. That's why very few people open companies in Serbia. Most people legalize their stay by registering as sole proprietors. Therefore, it's important to remember that a sole proprietor is liable for all obligations with all of their personal assets. For example, if you receive a fine of 20,000 euro, such fines do exist in the Balkans and you can't pay it in cash. Some of your movable or immovable property may be seized. Whereas in Montenegro, there are no such problems. You can open a company, whether it's active or a shell company, and obtain a residence permit through it. Thus, in Montenegro, your personal assets are protected from confiscation. You only risk the share capital of your company, which is just €1. The costs of obtaining a residence permit in both countries are more or less comparable. The expenses for maintaining a residence permit through a company, well, in Serbia, mainly through sole proprietorships, are lower. In Montenegro, why are they lower? If your company is operating, then taxes are lower in Montenegro. If your company is not operating, then in Montenegro this is allowed, but in Serbia it is not. Accordingly, in Serbia, you have to show business activity and pay taxes on profits that may not actually exist. And the appearance of the cities, well, I guess I should say a few words about that too. Montenegro is a wealthier country, so the cities look better. In addition, investment is more active there than in Serbia. Many investors are putting money into housing construction and sometimes even into entire neighborhoods. That probably also has some effect on the appearance of the cities. But overall, on average, cities in Montenegro look cleaner and better. Although it must be admitted that Serbia also has upscale neighborhoods, for example, Belgrade waterfront. Very nice areas. Whenever I come to Belgrade, I always stay there. Where to live? I've been to Serbia probably 20 or 30 times. Over the past 12 years, I've visited many regions, and I'm firmly convinced that only 2 cities in Serbia are suitable for living. These are Belgrade and Novi Sad. Many people, under the slogan "Belgrade is an expensive city," run off to some small villages, arguing that it's only about 20 minutes by car from the village to civilization. I wouldn't do that. Living in civilization or being 20 minutes away from it and the same distance back is a big difference. In Montenegro, I recommend taking a look at cities like Herceg Novi, Tivat, Budva, and Podgorica. As for prices, I haven't noticed a big difference in the cost of goods and services. If you really want to nitpick and look for where something is a few cents cheaper in one country than another, say by 1%, then there will probably be plenty of such examples. But I didn't see any significant difference in prices. As for the selection of goods, it's commonly believed that the selection of goods in Serbia is much greater than in Montenegro. This is both true and not true at the same time. The selection is greater if you live in Belgrade. If you're one of those who, for the sake of saving money, move to some Serbian village or small town, then within walking or even driving distance, the selection of goods will be the same as in Montenegro or even less. I've already talked about salaries in Serbia and Montenegro. Salaries in Montenegro are noticeably higher than in Serbia. A lot of Serbians are happy to work in Montenegro. The shortage of workers, primarily in construction, hotels, shops, and restaurants, is made up for by Bosnians and Serbians who come to work. Unemployment in Montenegro is practically non-existent. The only people who don't work are those who simply don't want to. By the way, there are actually quite a lot of people who don't want to work. The country is experiencing a shortage of labor, especially skilled workers, which is compensated for by foreigners coming to work. Meanwhile, in Serbia, unemployment is a serious problem. Taxes. On average, taxes in Montenegro are lower. For example, the corporate tax rate in Montenegro ranges from 9 to 15%, depending on the amount of profit. In Serbia, on the other hand, it is a fixed 15%. By the way, the Serbs recently lowered this tax. Previously, the difference was noticeably greater, while the Montenegrins, on the contrary, recently raised theirs. Now, the climate in Montenegro is one of the best in Europe. It is definitely more pleasant than in Serbia, although in principle there probably isn't some astronomical difference. As for the prospects of joining the EU, there is no doubt that Montenegro will become a member. The only question is the timing, which depends on how quickly the country meets EU standards. It doesn't depend on the EU itself, but primarily on Montenegro. Approximate timelines have already been announced, but everything will depend on whether Vasya in Montenegro, whether the country manages to complete its reforms in time to meet the deadline set by the EU. Meanwhile, the prospect of Serbia joining the EU is still unclear, and it's not even worth discussing any timelines at this point.